If you guys are considering moving to Costa Rica, I want to go over the positives and the negatives of living there and explain to you why ultimately after 7.5 months plus of being there, we decided to say bon voyage and exit the country. First of all, let's go over the positives because in Costa Rica, there are many pluses. Firstly and foremost, it's the nature. It is beautiful there, B-E-A, beautiful. Specifically in the southwest corner of the country, in an area called Uvita, up to Dominical. It is amazing. You just have water, big sandy beaches, and not far away they meet rainforest as it descends down the mountains with all of the waterfalls, with all of the vibrant life, the animal life there. The nature is amazing. It's fantastic. In areas of the world such as Laos and in Asian jungles, much of the rainforest is denuded of life, having been hunted out of existence. This is not the case in Costa Rica. For example, when we were looking in a high-priced area of Guanacaste, which is in the northwest, on the golf course there, in the gated community, large, we ran into a howler monkey on the golf course that walked towards me and bared its teeth at me, a coati mundi, and 2 different types of snake, one poisonous, a sea snake on the beach, and a king snake, not poisonous. That was in 1 day of being there. So you can imagine in an area where it is inhabited by people, what the wildlife must be like in the wilderness. It's fantastic. We saw sloths. We saw a coral snake eating another snake, poisonous, as well as nearly running into the highly toxic and dangerous fertile ants that accounts for many deaths every year. But regardless of that fact, Costa Rica is wild, it is alive, it is beautiful. The climate there is simply fantastic. And I grew up in California, between the Bay Area, Santa Barbara, and then Los Angeles. I've spent most of my life within California borders. And the weather in the Central Valley of Costa Rica, where the capital is, beats the pants, puts to shame that of California. It is 64 to 80 degrees around the year. There's plenty of rainfall, meaning that if you're fearful of water being a scarce resource in Costa Rica, it's unlikely to become one because there is so much rainfall. It's gorgeous. Those are really the main positives of living there. The Costa Rican attitude, Pura Vida, and the quite chill people in general. It's more true outside of the capital, as I'm going to discuss momentarily, but it does exist. People are generally chill, they're cool, there's fantastic surfing. So if you like outdoor activities, Costa Rica is fantastic and totally for you. Now to the downsides of Costa Rica. We originally moved to Costa Rica from Thailand, where I met my wife, a Canadian, a school teacher there. And we became pregnant, and at 38 weeks, during the time of COVID, they had threatened that there would be a mandatory PCR test. And if you tested positive, then they would give you a forced emergency C-section. Then they would separate and quarantine the mother and the baby, but not together, apart from each other. To make matters worse, the baby would not be given the mother's milk, deprived of those vital nutrients, deprived of the immunity that the milk would have offered him. So, based on that, with that 1% of probability of coming to fruition being far too high for our liking, given the negative ramifications, it's not a speeding ticket, we set sail and went to Costa Rica. And what about Costa Rica might surprise you? Well, first of all, it's incredibly expensive. My friend, who is Filipina, described it as the most expensive country on earth. What does she mean by that? Because technically the prices aren't the same. And she worked in Norway, and I've been to Norway, and the prices are far below the levels there. What she meant was for the average person in Costa Rica, the prices are sky high in comparison to the amount of money that the average Costa Rican takes in each month. There is very little left over afterwards. Why is this? Well, partly it's because Costa Rica is a difficult country to get to. It's not very big. The population is not large, so it costs more to ship things there. It costs more to distribute. Also, they have incredibly high import taxes. If you purchase a car, it's going to cost you 60% more, in excess of 50% if you buy it off the lot, than it would cost in the United States. They have ridiculous taxes on cars, on gasoline, on everything. They tax the crap out of you, raising the prices substantially. So, for example, for cars, for gasoline, for food, going out to restaurants included, in general, is going to be higher than in the United States. That being said, you can get food more cheaply in certain parts of the country, eating locally. But even when you go to the farmers markets in certain areas like Escazú, which is a more wealthy area, it's going to cost you a good amount of money. It's not as cheap as you think it's going to be. Secondly, all that money that the government takes in doesn't go towards the roads, I'll tell you that much. And I'll tell you where it goes in a second, because the roads are absolutely terrible. You have pothole after pothole after pothole attempting to trick you into its clutches so that they can ruin your suspension. The potholes are ubiquitous and everywhere. And the roads elsewhere are often unpaved and very, very difficult to traverse. If you live anywhere but the Central Valley, you're going to need a 4x4 vehicle. Of course, this adds to the cost of the automobile, which, as I might have stated previously, is going to cost you way more than in the United States, whether you buy used or new, because that token that you have to send over to the government in order to purchase the original automobile, well, that has to be made up for some reason, and people are less willing to part with their cars for a lower price. So where do you think that money goes? You can ask any Costa Rican, and I did not find one that didn't believe that government graft wasn't an incredibly important phenomenon and acknowledged by every single Costa Rican. It was the only difference was the vehemence and the vociferousness with which they stated their displeasure. So you have the government graft, all that money goes into the bureaucratic pockets. In terms of the leadership, it's not one that is going to benefit the country long term. They wanted, when we were there, and they had the elections at the beginning of this month of April 2022 and got in a new party. But these party leaders were in the image of the Venezuelan government and trying to turn Costa Rica even more socialistic, communistic than it already is. They had draconian laws around COVID. What specifically? They wanted to mandate vaccines for children, 5 years old and up. And guess what? Our son is going to be turning 5 pretty soon. And we did not want to become permanent residents and be subject to Costa Rican laws that if we brought him into the hospital, that they were going to keep them there, as is rumor has happened, and force a vaccine into him for a disease that fortunately does not affect young people at a very high rate, and thus have to deal with the downside of getting the vaccine. This is a communistic urge to dictate what others must do, that the collective is of greater importance than the individual, and it doesn't fit into my libertarian ethos of life. Also, I was nearly arrested for not wearing a mask outside, not inside, but outside of the airport in December of last year. They were not nice about it. And when my mask dropped below my nose within the airport, I also was given a very stern talking to. And it did not help that the school that we were sending our 4-year-old to decided that we were going to be uninvited to the end of the school year party because of our vaccination status. And I'll let you guess what that might have been. But this fearfulness, this collectiveness is not something that I personally applaud. And if you guys do, then by all means, I'm just going over my criteria and why part of the reason that we left was this. The food in Costa Rica, it ain't good. It's bad. It runs For me, the bronze medal for worst food on the planet. Colombia gold, Myanmar/Burma silver, Costa Rica bronze. Yeah, you can go to a couple of decent restaurants that might prepare something okay, but in general, nah, you're not going to like the food. It does not compare to Mexican food, Thai food, Indian food, not even close. It is definitely at the bottom of the world food chain. Crime. The funny thing is that I have been places that are incredibly dangerous. I've been in the deserts of Syria right before that country blew up as the only white person there and the only person without a gun. I had to cross the Mongolian border on foot after being kicked out of Russia. And yet I refused to go where my wife originally proposed, which was Mexico, which is actually where we ended up after we left Costa Rica, because in my mind, the cartels were prevalent and ubiquitous in all aspects of Mexican life. I haven't found that to be true, but the crime in I was scared of the crime to take my family there because I'm responsible, but the crime in Costa Rica is not horrendous, but it is definitely something to watch out for, and it's been on the uptick lately. We did have one experience. Somebody hopped the fence in the Airbnb. We were staying in a standalone house. This is why many Costa Ricans with any type of money always live in a gated community, and why it's so difficult to sell a house that is not within the gates of a community with a guard, etc. But somebody hopped the fence, stole stuff out of our car, went into the backyard, stole, of all things, my son's scooter, and that was what we had. We heard other stories from friends of ours that had been held at knife point while pregnant. Somebody else had been held at a gun and mugged/robbed. This is a common occurrence and becoming more common within Costa Rica. And lastly, Costa Rica is a bureaucratic mess. We were given the opportunity to get permanent residence. We wasted thousands of dollars doing so because our son was born within Costa Rican borders, making him a Tico, similar if you're born in the United States on U.S. soil, you become a U.S. citizen, regardless of who your parents are. Now, given our travels, we were unable to procure all the documents necessary, but the list was mountainous, as opposed to Mexico, where you can come and gain permanent residence just by proving that you have X amount of dollars in the bank. I'm not kidding. A lot of people might ascribe that to some sort of Mexican corruption as opposed to the proper way that things should be done in Costa Rica, and you should be able to prove all these things. But the stack of things that you'll need for Costa Rica is enormous. It's just an example of a bureaucracy. And yes, they do care about the kids, but the PANI, which is essentially Child Protective Services, in order to leave with our son, with his passport, being the same last name as me, with his mom, I still needed permission from the government, and we had to make that appointment, and it took over a month for the appointment to come in, and then I had to have a whole list of things that I had to bring to the appointment. Okay, but that's just for permission to leave the country with the kid. Now, yeah, maybe a lot of people would say that's great about caring about the child that the government does, but the government essentially thinks that they own your kid. So, for example, we have a friend who has a 5-year-old who is being taken care of by another family while she works abroad, and if she goes back and the child's 7, the child can elect to bypass his mother and to live with the other family. So, yeah, you don't necessarily have a lot of control over your children in this bureaucracy, but everything takes an enormous amount of time. Just to wait, wait, wait. They're incredibly inefficient. They want mountains of paperwork. Everything costs an incredible amount. When we were purchasing a 2005 used Honda Pilot with 178,000 miles on it, just to give you an example, it cost us $7,700 plus $600 in lawyer fees and taxes for this old of a car. This is what the Costa Ricans have to go through. And we had to wait for the lawyer. And the prices for the lawyers are fixed. So when you're buying a house, it is actually illegal to try to negotiate the 1.25% fee that the lawyer gets. So when you're buying a $2 million house, the lawyer gets 1.25% of that, the same they would if you bought a $100,000 house. You can see the difference and the rent-seeking behavior that is ensconced into law and made permanent by the bureaucrats at, no doubt, the behest of the lawyers' society, who make out like bandits by depriving people of the right to negotiate. We tried to negotiate, and the opposing or the other parties, real estate agent told us that that would be an illegal thing to do. There were just so many things that added up that we just wanted a more simple life. Costa Rica is very spread out. Unless you live in the capital city in the Central Valley, you know, it's often difficult to procure necessary materials. You're far away from hospitals. And yes, the hospitals in Costa Rica are good. The private ones, I'm not so sure about the public ones that are funded by the Social Security system, but a lot of the wealthy opt for the private hospitals, if that will be in any indication of how good the public health system is. Look, Costa Rica is gorgeous. There's lots of water. There's lots of animals and natures. There's fantastic surfing. It's a wonderful place if you like outdoor activities and you're not too much worried about anything. But raising 3 children, trying to do what is right for them, we decided that we wanted to opt for an easier life and not have the threat of the jab being mandated for my 5-year-old son when he turns 5. That was not something that we desired. We don't want to give the government that much power over us, so we moved somewhere else where individual liberty is more highly valued. That's Costa Rica. I hope that I've given you guys something here. Please leave a comment. Let me know your thoughts on what I've said, your experiences, whether or not this has helped you if you are deciding to move there or not. And have a fantastic day. Thumb up the video. Feel free to subscribe. Peace out, and Pura Vida if you decide on Costa Rica. Peace.